Well, I'm available to start at right tackle.
You can't see when I have clothes on.
All right. Well, there's not an even playing field. There's never been an even playing field. There never will be an even playing field.
What shampoo do you use on your hair?
You don't need to be Superman to play in this offense.
You're listening to The Red Zone.
Welcome, Badgers fans, to another episode of The Red Zone. On this week's podcast, we're going to talk to our very own Jim Polzin of the State Journal about Wisconsin's loss to BYU, how far the Badgers fell in the AP poll and whether that's appropriate or not, and also looking ahead to Iowa and what we can expect this week against the Hawkeyes. We're also going to talk to Wisconsin defensive lineman Kayden Lyles about his transition from offensive line to defensive line and how he's kind of fared in his first three games. But first, let's get to our interview with Jim. We now welcome Jim Polzin to the Red Zone podcast. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. You're actually the one who, if you forgot, named this podcast, so I'd like to have you on every once in a while.
Yeah. I still haven't received any naming rights from it, but...
Yeah, I know. Well, that royalty check's coming soon.
Okay. Right.
But you know what? So Wisconsin's 3 games in now. Obviously, the disappointing loss to BYU on Saturday. How shocked were you by this? Did you see? The first 2 games weren't very impressive, obviously,
no.
But I don't think any of us really saw this coming, I guess.
Have you publicly taken credit for kind of seeing this coming yet? Because if you haven't, I'll give you credit.
I was hoping you would just go ahead and bring that up so I wouldn't have to.
I'll tell your listeners, we were standing there before the game started, probably 45 minutes to an hour before the game started, and you said you had a weird feeling about this game, and I think I kind of discounted that because I just didn't think BYU was very good after seeing their game against Cal. But you were right. It was a weird game, and I mean, maybe we should have seen it coming. I walked away from both the first 2 games just not very impressed, just thinking that something was off with Wisconsin, and sure enough, a lot was off. I mean, I didn't think we were walking down to the interviews. You weren't down with us yet, but it was hard finding things that went well on Saturday, like who actually played well, what position group actually played well, and so that was maybe the most shocking part. Is it wasn't just fluky. I really thought BYU kind of controlled that game throughout, and they were probably the more physical team, which you almost never hear, or you never say that after a Wisconsin game. So there were a lot of head scratching things about that game. Yeah,
and I think, like you said, physicality. I mean, I thought BYU's offensive line really kind of took it to Wisconsin's defensive line on a couple occasions, and I did have a weird feeling about the game. I think partially BYU might be a better team than maybe they're given credit for after the season they had last year. We're going to have to see how their season turns out, because if they end up being, a 9-3 or 10-2 team and turn out to be a top 25 team, maybe this loss doesn't look quite as bad in hindsight once we get to that point.
Right. I mean, it was easy to discount BYU because they'd beaten Arizona in week 1. Well, as it turned out, Arizona wasn't very good. Yeah. But the home loss to Cal, which, and maybe Cal's better than I think too, and that loss isn't as terrible as it looks. But, they weren't flashy by any means. I thought they schemed UW pretty well, did some things that, were a little different early on in the game, a lot of jet sweeps. And then just kind of came down to execution, which sounds so cliche, but I think it's true, especially for close games. I thought BYU executed better. They were more physical and just played better. Really, I mean, you wouldn't have, had you not known Wisconsin was the higher-ranked team and just gone to that game, you wouldn't have known which one was the supposed better team, because I thought BYU just played better.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought, like you said, I can't really think of any position group that you could say play. I guess maybe you could say the running backs played well. I mean, we talked a little bit about how Jonathan Taylor probably could have had a better game, but I thought Groshek played really well. Taiwan Deal had 2 touchdowns. So I guess the running backs played pretty well, but other than that, I still don't know what to make of the offensive line switch in the second half where they went with 3 new guys. I mean, I don't know. Going back and watching it, I don't think Biotic and Benshaw played that poorly. I thought Edwards had some bad plays, but maybe it was just strictly because of the heat. But it was weird how a lot of guys answered that too. They, a lot of it was, some people said it was the heat. Some guys said, we just it was the plan to get those guys work, and so that was another weird situation. There are a lot of weird things about that game.
Yeah, the weird thing about having a plan to do that is it just doesn't seem like that plan would carry through in the second half of a close game, right? I mean, if you have a plan to do that, you'd think you'd get it early. If you want to give those guys a series, do it early, because it just doesn't. It seems like the timing seemed odd, unless you're trying to send a message, which is fine. I mean, if you are trying to send a message to guys that you're not playing well, we have guys that have earned playing time we're going to give them a chance.
Yeah, or maybe
that's fine.
Maybe they thought they'd be up more in the
Right,
third quarter, so
maybe,
they thought they could do that. But what do you think of this team now going into conference play? Because is this more of a little bit more of a fluke? I mean, obviously we talked about how they didn't play that well in the first two games either, but they were still 2 31-point wins. Is this more of a fluke performance where no one really played well and maybe they get a little bit of a wake-up call here, or do you think there's some serious issues here and it's going to be hard to turn this around?
Well, I mean, I guess if I thought there was a sure thing going into the season, I thought it was the offensive line was going to play really well and kind of dominate teams and, bully teams. And that's been the biggest thing. They had 400 yards of rushing the second week, so it's hard to say they played poorly. But I don't know. I walked away from that game just thinking there was something off. So I don't know. You'd like to see them trending upward going into the Big Ten season, and they certainly are not doing that. And that's the biggest concern to me. I think everybody had their eye on Hornibrook entering the season. Would he make a step? Would he be more like the Orange Bowl Alex Hornibrook? And we haven't seen that. I mean, he's just continues to make mistakes that are just kind of head scratching, I guess is the word I'd use. The interception was just a really poor throw, and it allowed BYU to really grab momentum in that game on Saturday. So you'd like to see him avoid those. I think 17 interceptions now since the start of last season. That's a lot for a team that doesn't throw the ball, a ton. This isn't a pass happy offense. So he's got to avoid those mistakes. And really in a game like that where nobody else is really stepping up, you need your quarterback to kind of be that guy, and he just wasn't on Saturday. So, I think this team in a lot of ways goes kind of on how Alex Hornibrook goes. I mean, if he plays well on Saturday night, I think they have a chance to beat Iowa. If he doesn't, I think it's going to be a real struggle.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, like you mentioned with Hornibrook, it's sort of like, I feel like in the past that they've had games like this, but they've just been able to pull it out. The Georgia State game a couple of years ago, people forget about that now, but they were down in the fourth quarter of that game, and if that was almost a complete disaster. But they made enough plays to get out of it, and I feel like this time no one made that play to get them out of the hole. And the Hornibrook interception, if that doesn't happen, I feel like it's sort of a completely different second half because they get the touchdown right after that, and it's 21 to 14 at that point, and BYU only gets 3 points the rest of the way, but it's too late at that point. So so Wisconsin dropped 12 spots to 18th in the AP poll. I think they're number 16 in the coaches poll. I put them down at 22, a little lower than
I think that's fair, and I was wondering if they'd drop out completely. I mean,
I was going to see what you thought if they still deserve to be in the top 25, or I know you probably haven't looked at team by team,
right,
and come up with their rankings. But do you think that the drop was appropriate, or do you think they should have fallen even more than that?
It's just, this argument's made year after year after year, but it's preseason rankings kind of dictate a lot of things. Like if this was anybody else, if this is a team that started the year outside the top 25 and then lost at home to BYU, they'd be not in the top 25, right? Well, because Wisconsin started at 4, I think there's a feeling that you can't drop them all the way out. It just, to me, it hasn't looked like a top 25 team, which is scary to say for a team that started in the top 5, right? I just think there's been enough holes and question marks and just inefficiency that it doesn't look like a top 25 team right now. But will it? Maybe in time it will. We're going to see it Saturday. That's, I think, the really good thing about when you lose a game and have a really tough opponent the next week is you just kind of have to move on. You can't dwell on it much. You're kind of forced to move on to the next opponent. And if you beat Iowa, then suddenly, okay, you can take a breath and things look a lot better. You're probably the team to beat in the West. You've got more opportunities still to come up with some signature wins that'll kind of change the outlook of the season. But certainly nobody had them at 2-1 at this point. Yeah,
I think I hear a lot of people kind of get on to voters for letting their preseason kind of thoughts affect their voting, especially early in the season. But I feel like you still have to kind of let that play into your thinking a little bit. You look at week 1, Michigan State, beat Utah State by 7 points. That wasn't one of the 25 most impressive wins of week 1, but you're not going to drop them from 13 to out just because they had a bad win against Utah State. So I still think when you look at this Wisconsin team, obviously a lot of the talent is still there, especially offensively, that hasn't come through yet. So I don't know. I definitely consider dropping them all the way out, but I think what I've learned doing this poll the last few years is you don't have to be that great to be right between 21 and 25. You start running out of teams kind of quickly there, and I think they'll have an opportunity to kind of play their way back up. Obviously, with Iowa this week, like you mentioned, like if they get through this game, it's going to be interesting to see when they hit Michigan in a few weeks too. If they're able to, even if they don't win that game, are they competitive and are they keeping it close? And so that's going to be interesting. But
where's Cal, by the way? What's Cal done besides that BYU?
Cal is 3-0.
Are they
but
ranked?
I think they're unranked still.
That makes no sense to me.
I considered them for sure. I think I left them just out. There's quite a few 3-0 teams that I don't know that are you kind of have to sort through and try to decide which one's better than the other. But
I mean, I know it's hard to do, and we've talked about this in the past. But don't you think that if the team that beat Wisconsin lost to a team that's 3-0, Team C should be ahead of Wisconsin, right? Like Cal should be ahead of Wisconsin if you.
Yeah, well, we talked about this before, but
I mean, that makes.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but it's also you have to look at the totality of the three games too. And I think Cal had I'm trying to remember what their resume. I think they beat UNC by 7, and UNC had just a really terrible loss the next week. It looks like they might be really bad. But yeah, I mean, it went over BYU at this point. Looks a lot better.
That's the most impressive. I mean, that's more impressive than Wisconsin's done.
What Wisconsin has done, sure. Yeah. BYU actually got in. Oh, because you could also look at that and say, well, how is BYU not ahead of Wisconsin? But they do have the loss against Cal. So, right. I mean, I think...
Did BYU get more votes than Cal?
BYU's 25th. Okay. So they did get more votes than Cal.
That makes no sense to me either. I mean, that really seems dumb to me. And I know it's really easy to
I know, you can kind of go in circles trying to play the head-to-head game, and it certainly matters. And but I mean, I think what you try to do is just look at the totality of the season and decide, is this team better than this team? So, I don't really think. I think if Wisconsin and BYU played 10 times on a neutral field, I think Wisconsin would win more than 5 of them. I think they'd win.
Yeah, but you're playing
6
or
7.
I understand, but you're playing the if game, and
that goes back to
we actually saw them beat Wisconsin, right?
That goes back to having your preseason expectations, sort of still affecting your vote early in the season. I think this stuff kind of plays itself out after a while. I mean, we'll see over the next 10 weeks if BYU is actually better than Wisconsin or not. But it's when you have an upset like this, you don't want to completely overreact. You want to realize that BYU just beat Wisconsin on the road. But I think you also want to, for example, like back when App State beat Michigan, you're not going to rank App State over Michigan at that point, probably.
What happened? I'd have to know what happened. Like, did Michigan follow the poll after that happened, or?
I can't remember. I think they were maybe 5th that year.
Okay.
And then I can't remember if they fell all the way out or if they were really low. They might have fallen all the way out, but actually App State I think was an FCS team at that point, so I guess they weren't going to get ranked.
Right.
I mean, that's just the upset that came to mind. But
right.
I just mean there's going to be a threshold for everybody.
Right.
Where you don't strictly go by head to head. Like at some point there's going to be a big enough upset where you're like, okay, this team's actually still not better than this team, but it's just kind of where your threshold
doesn't that make polls kind of silly though, and not to demean polls or your job as a pollster?
Oh, no,
I know you take it seriously.
That's not my job. I don't care.
No, but seriously, that makes polls, because if you're basing it on subjective, even though BYU beat Wisconsin, I still think BYU is the better, or I still think Wisconsin's the better team. I mean, ultimately, you kind of have to, and it's easy to do. It's easier to do early in the season is just base it on results, right? Like,
yeah. Well,
Cal
I mean, I feel like
BYU won at Wisconsin, therefore Cal should be better than Wisconsin. But Wisconsin started the year really, really high.
Yeah. Like, I feel like later in the season, I won't be saying I'm going to base everything on. Okay, let's say week 9. Like, okay, I'm going to base everything on what's happened in the first 8 games. I'm not going to be like, oh, Wisconsin was. I thought they were going to be awesome before the season. It's just really challenging early in the season.
Yeah. When
you get upsets like this, to know what to do with it. Because I mean, I wasn't sure whether I should rank BYU or if they should be ahead of Wisconsin, or if they had beaten Cal, it would have been a lot easier to possibly do that. But we'll see it play out though. It's
it's going to be weird. I mean, and maybe Wisconsin's just not as good as we think, right? Maybe maybe there's 3 more losses on the plate for Wisconsin, and it's going to be a team that kind of resides around the lower half of the top 25 or even out of it. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if Wisconsin goes to Iowa this week and loses, then they'll drop out of the poll, and I don't think we'll have to worry about it as much. And BYU can work their way up. If Wisconsin loses this week and BYU wins, I'm sure BYU will be ahead of them at that point. But
does it surprise you how much people care about polls?
It does. So I mean, especially since it doesn't have any effect on the end of the season. Like back when the AP poll was part of the BCS, I would totally understand that. And I don't think I would vote in the AP poll, honestly, if it was actually because the thing about people need to understand about these polls, and as well as I do, that you and I are covering Wisconsin all Saturday. Like, we don't get a chance to watch that many other games, and I used to the poll, and I do it now, and I'm sure when you had the vote, you did everything you could to be as informed as you could, but you're not sitting there watching all these teams every week, and it's not possible. And so we do the best we can. It's really just for fun, honestly. It's just I think it's just a neat exercise, and it's sort of, especially until the College Football Playoff Committee releases their first rankings, you can kind of see where these teams are at. But I've gotten a lot of fans coming after me on Twitter. Someone's like, even the little tiniest details. I think after week 1 I had Notre Dame 7 and Auburn 8, and Auburn fans like, could you please explain to me how you have Notre Dame over Auburn? And I'm like, well, it's one spot. I don't really feel very strongly about it.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't know how much of that you got when you.
Yeah, I remember back when I did it. I had a Notre Dame fan who was all over me for some sort of perceived slight, and certain fan bases, I think, take it more serious than others. I mean, the reason I asked is I thought there was we have a Facebook page for the State Journal, and you would post your weekly update on, Wisconsin dropped 1 spot to number 5, and the following week, Wisconsin dropped 1 spot to number 6, and there was some people that were legitimately ticked off about it, and I'm just I don't get, who cares? Really, who cares if they're 4, 5, or 6? If they win all their games, they're going to be where they're supposed to be, and it shouldn't matter where an AP ranking has them in September. It's it seemed kind of silly to me.
Yeah, that's pretty silly to me too, and I feel like them dropping 4 to 5 was just because I think when the preseason poll was voted on, the Urban Meyer thing hadn't resolved, and I think people didn't know if he would be back the entire season, and so. And the thing is too, you have to look at that when someone drops 1 spot after a win, you have to kind of look at the previous week and I think there was one week where 4 through 7 were separated by 30 points,
votes,
and it's just it only takes a couple of people to change their mind to move the spot. So it's not if someone goes from 4 to 5, it's not the entire voting base decided, we need to suddenly move this team ahead of Wisconsin. So people definitely take it too seriously, but thankfully it doesn't actually matter in the end.
Right.
Let's touch on Iowa real quick before we end it. But have you been to a night game at Kinnick?
I've not been to a night game, but even the day games, are it's a different type of venue because the fans are right on top of you. That's what the players have always said. The Wisconsin sidelines, they're right on top of you, and so much like night games at Wisconsin, there's fans are going to have all day to tailgate, and it's a cool stadium. Just enjoy. I love covering games there, but having a night atmosphere will be good. I want to say one of the games back in the James White, Melvin Gordon, Joel Stave era was a 2:30 start or maybe a 3:30 start, and so it got to be at least where it was under the lights because I think it was a November game.
Yeah, I think that was I think it was 2014.
Is that where Stave scrambled for a big first?
Yeah, I think it was right after I got on the beat, and it was a really close game. And I do remember it being dark by the end of it, and I think it was at 2:30. I think that was a classic. Yeah, Stave had the scramble for first down. I think on third down. Yeah, that was so that was a pretty crazy atmosphere that night.
I'm looking forward to it. I think I don't know. I wouldn't think that this team has as much experience as Wisconsin that the atmosphere will beat them. If they're going to lose, I think it'll be because Iowa's a pretty good team and typically plays well at home. Although Wisconsin's won there, 3 times in a row? 4 times in a row?
It might be 4.
4 times in a row?
I had to go back and check.
Which is a crazy stat. So we'll see. It should be a good game.
Do you think, I'm not going to ask you for, I guess, a prediction right now on a Monday when we're recording this, but What chance do you give Iowa of pulling this off, or do you even view this as an upset at this point? If
No,
Iowa
I mean, I
wins this
think
game?
the spread was like Wisconsin's favorite, right?
Favorite like 3.5.
3.5. So it's basically a toss-up game. No, I don't see it as an upset. I mean, I think part of the thing is we don't know. 3 weeks is not a lot of time to find out a lot about any team, but we don't know a lot about Iowa yet. Their best opponent they played was Iowa State. How good is Iowa? I don't know. I mean, I know they lost some really key pieces from last year, Josh Jackson being one of them. But they've plugged the gaps on defense. Their linebacking crew was practically new. Those guys have played well. But again, have they been tested like they'll be testing against Wisconsin? It's two teams that look kind of similar. It's like looking in the mirror. It's going to come down to physical play. The one thing I want to see is this loss to BYU a real eye-opener for Wisconsin? I mean, is this a thing that can kind of trigger a positive reaction, and do they come out and play the way we thought they would play and not the way they have played these first 3 weeks? If they put together a really good game, I think Wisconsin can win this game. I think if you line up man-to-man, they're the better team, top to bottom of the roster. But the fact that it's at Iowa, night game, we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like this is really their season-defining game here.
Yeah, if you lose it Sunday, it's if you're 2-2 and it really changes things. I mean, I think any talk of the playoff right now is silly. I mean, you have to certainly beat Iowa. You have to go win at Michigan. You probably have to win. I mean, you have to win out in the regular season, then beat Ohio State to even have a chance. So let's it's a little bit of a one step at a time thing you got to do here. But it's just I think everybody thought they would be in the Big Ten championship game, and if you lose this game, that becomes really, really difficult. Iowa's going to have the inside track to that game, so it's a big game. It's a kind of a where your season goes from here game.
Yeah, I feel like that loss to BYU can take their season one of two ways. I feel like if they take it well and come back and win this game, then suddenly you're in the driver's seat for the division, and maybe you don't make the playoffs, right. But I think you can make it back to Indianapolis. Give yourself another shot at a Big Ten championship. I mean, if this season ends up 9-3, but you pull off an upset that last week and you win a Big Ten title, I don't think anyone's going to complain about the season.
I don't know.
Well, maybe they will.
It'll be interesting. No, I mean, it'll be interesting. We have no idea how this season's going to turn out, but I think a lot of people did come up like, is Wisconsin ever going to get to the playoff? This would be the year, right? I mean, it seemed to be like, especially with this offense, everything was in place. So I think for some people, especially younger people that have really only experienced success with this program, I think it was kind of a playoff or bust type atmosphere, and will they adjust expectations? I don't know.
I do feel like if they lose this game against Iowa, there's definitely potential for the season to really fall apart.
I don't know. I mean, I like to say that Paul Chris and his staff do a good job of kind of focusing week to week, and that wouldn't happen. But I don't know. I mean, we've seen it before, seasons with huge expectations. I remember, I was talking to OT about this the other day. 2008 was a season where they had a lot of seniors back. They were kind of riding the high of a 9-4 type season the season before, and then it just did not end up the way they hoped. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, you need leadership in times like this, and we'll see how good Wisconsin's leaders are. And they have some guys that I would consider strong leaders: T.J. Edwards, Michael Dieter, Dakota Dixon. Can those guys kind of pick up the locker room and get this team back on track? We'll see.
And win or lose, I think it's good they got a bye next week.
Well, and I think
regroup.
Absolutely. And historically, coming off Iowa games, it's always a physical game, and BYU is physical. So two straight weeks of really physical games in the trenches, I think will be, you're right, a perfect time for a kind of take a step back and rest.
You can follow Jim on Twitter at Jim Polzin WSJ.
Nice job.
And thanks. I always forget people's Twitter handles, so I'm surprised I got that one. And read his stuff on madison.com as well. Basketball season's coming up. You're our basketball guy here at the State Journal, so make sure to give him a follow. Thanks for joining me, Jim.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
You kind of got thrown into the fire here after the position switch. Kind of walked right into a first-team spot. How do you feel like you've kind of fared so far these first three games, and particularly against BYU?
BYU was a stretch team, so really couldn't control that much up front. A lot of boot passes and stuff like that. But in the other two games, we got a lot of run action. So I felt like I needed to improve on a lot of stuff technique-wise with that. But I think that's how everybody should be, is improving each week. You know, this week I feel a lot more comfortable with the technique that I've been coached. So yeah, I just feel like I'm getting better each week with it.
How difficult was the transition at first? You know, they moved you over in that first practice. You're taking first team reps. How tough was that?
I was really nervous, but you know, we were just in we were just in helmets.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was just learning the game. I was just nervous at first, but as camp went on, you know, I really felt comfortable in the position, just kind of, you know, understanding the technique and what they want from me. So, you know, each day I get more and more comfortable with it.
Was there a moment maybe in camp or the first game where things started to click and you realized you were going to be fine at this position?
You know, as we went more padded days in camp, you know, I finally understood, like, it finally clicked that I just needed to just go, just launch out and just play physical and fast. And so now, you know, I haven't really gone back to, you know, just being subtle. You know, it's just having those days in camp where, you know, it was hard, but we just had a lot of days where we just went full padded or half packed that just kind of got my mindset going.
Just one of those things where at first you're maybe thinking about what you're doing, and then
thinking too much, yeah.
After that you're just kind of playing.
Exactly, yeah. Just thinking too much at first, rather than just seeing where my keys and just reacting off of that. So.
How much has Olive helped you? I know he's at nose, but you know, how much has he kind of helped the transition for you?
He's helped a lot. Helped me understand the game and what it takes to be a defensive lineman at this level. So, you know, on the field, whether I need to ask a question right then and there, or off the field in the meeting room, you know, he'll either give me his notes in the meeting room so I could look over, or it would just help me out on the field with technique and everything, something that he sees. If I'm on the field and he's off, or even if we're on the field and he feels something was wrong, you know, he'll tell me and coach me up. So it's been a really good help.
I know the coaches were really liking what you were doing at offensive line before you switched, and it was kind of a need-based switch, you know, for your team. Do you see this as a long-term thing after this season for you? Do you think you'll eventually switch back to the offensive line, or how do you kind of see that right now?
I have no idea. I'm just playing day by day, and you know, whatever the coaches want me to do or whatever they feel is best for me, I'm going to listen to them. But right now I'm playing defense, so I got to give all my effort on defense. So I don't know what the future holds. I don't want to look at it. And so I'm just playing it day by day.
Do you enjoy defense just as much, though?
Yeah, it's pretty fun. So.
Do you expect it to be that fun? Or I'm sure you played a good bit in high school, too, right?
Yeah. You know, everybody says, you know, defense, dark side, you know, it's always funner on this side. All that kind of stuff. Once we finally got going and, you know, you start making plays and everything, it really becomes fun. So.
Yeah. What was difficult about BYU's running game for you guys to stop? I know they had the jet sweep action a lot that was that can be really challenging to defend, but and like you said, a lot of plays maybe you're not you can't really do much about. But kind of, what do you think as a defense as a whole? What did you guys kind of mess up in that BYU game? You think?
No, I don't know what the responsibilities of the outside linebackers, corners, or safeties are, but I just know that as a interior lineman, you know, we're supposed to help out our backers, you know, flow to the ball, and so at any point in time, if we need to eat two people and just keep them free, that's what we need to do. But we haven't really had that many opportunities in that game to do that. So they had a lot of RPOs and jet sweeps and stuff like that, or read the four eyes that we really couldn't control, or, you know, we were taught to key up a certain person and they just didn't have the ball. So, you know, it's just something that I think our coaches have gotten all the other positions to really get going and handle and correct them on what they need to fix. So I think we're good from here.
Yeah, I'm sure you always hear about Iowa being a really physical team. And do you feel like this is a really big challenge for you going up against a team like Iowa, the first game in the conference, having switched, you know, still only a couple months ago to defense? Do you feel like this is sort of going to be a big measuring stick for you?
Oh, yeah. You know, everybody says Big Ten football is different when we start playing each other. So I think this will be a really good game to just just go out there and just do all the stuff that I've been coached and just be physical and dominant, more physical and dominant than them, and just play my ass off and just do as best as I could. So, yeah.
All right, thanks, Kayden. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for this week. A big thanks to Jim and Kayden for coming on. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure you do so on iTunes or Google Play, and keep visiting madison.com for all of your Badgers football coverage. Thanks for listening.